Hello guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Krishna Nugraha Harischandra and I'm from Ipmi International Business School. So today I'm going to present to you about my course mind map from Global Economy and International Business class. And before I start, I want to say thank you to my lecturers, Professor Roy Samble and also Bu Yulita for teaching a really great class, and also for giving some insights from the global economy and international business class. Thank you, Prof. Roy and Ibu Yulita. Okay, guys, this is the big mind map of the global economy and international business class. And today I'm gonna explain to you more details about each of the branch of the mind map. So let's get started. So first, we're gonna talk about new economy. So new economy here, it has three pillars of the new economy. So first, you have to make customer service better. The second is the cost reduction. You have to reduce your cost. And the third is you have to be transparent and you also have to compete with your competitors. And so there are debates between jobs and wages and income equality in your economy. Since when you're talking about cost reduction, you have to make sure you manage your cost efficiently, including for the jobs and wages and also the income from your employees and also your own income. And also in the economy, there are also disruptions. The first is crisis, economic crisis, like recently this country, Indonesia, we had cooking oil crisis, something like that crisis, or maybe like economic crisis in 2008. And also we have also disruptions from digital economy, such as like digital banks and also online marketplace, which also generates income from their digital activities. And the third is global economy turmoil. For example, like the conflict or the war in Russia and Ukraine, which affected the supplies of many commodities such as the oil and also the wheat and etc. And also we have to move on to the next chapter of the global economy and international business class. The second is the tariff and also the quotas. So in tariff and quotas, what is tariff? Tariff is a tax on imports, and quota is a specific limit on import quantity. So in managing a country, we have to analyze the tariff and the quotas. So when we analyze the tariff and quotas, there are two events that we have to make sure that this may be beneficial or not for the country. The first is consumer surplus. Consumer surplus is from the consumer point of view. When a consumer buys a product or maybe purchase a service, they gain the value much more than what they pay. And also for the producer surplus is from the producer point of view. So it happens when the revenue is way larger than the minimum cost or the cost of production. And the second, about tariff and quotas, there is also an effect of resource allocation and income distribution. The first is that weight loss or a destruction of consumer or producer surplus that is not matched by a gain elsewhere in the system. So it's just loss. There is no consumer surplus, there is no producer surplus. It's just loss. No one wins and no one gets the surplus. And the second is efficiency loss. Efficiency loss is a dead weight loss on the production side. And so the third point in the tariff and quotas is the form of quotas. So the form of quotas, there are two forms. The first is voluntary export restraints or agreements between an importing and exporting countries to voluntarily limit exports. And the second is import licensing requirements, which is a requirement that any importer must obtain a license. So when they don't have a license, they cannot import. And also the number of license are also the amounts of the import are limited. And the other form of protection from the country, besides tariff and quotas, there are non-tariff barriers and also non-tariff measures. Okay, we move on to the next point of the class. Is about the basic rights of labor, which is in this part. Okay, the income and standards part. So income and standards, we also have to make sure that we pay our labor, we also pay our employees, and we follow the standards of the income of the labor cost. So the first, we have to make sure of the basic rights of the labor, which is we have to make sure there are no forced labor. We also have to make sure that they are free to make associations of the labor. They also have right to organize and bargain collectively. And we have to make sure that we do not employ child labor. And last is we do not discriminate in employment. But when we are talking about income and standards, we also face the four main objections of labor standards. The first is the lack of effectiveness. Some producers maybe have different point of view when giving like the basic income, or maybe like giving high income, because they relate the cost of the labor, or maybe the labor cost, they relate it to the effectiveness. So when the income is high, the effectiveness is low, and it costs so much on the producer. And the second is the tendency to fear towards perfectionism. The third is disagreements over specific contents of standards. So when talking about countries to countries, they have different standards about the income. And the last is potential of trade war. And we move on to the next point, which is issues in trade environment. So there are two issues. The first is transboundary problems, or the problems is cross borders. For example, like greenhouse effect, or maybe carbon emission, or maybe like the tax on carbon emission. And second is non-transboundary problems, or the problem do not cross the borders, is inside the country or inside an area, like pesticide contamination in the field, or maybe like drought, extreme drought, etc. After that, we can also talk about alternatives for labor and environmental problems. The first is labeling. The second is use of home country standards while investing abroad, and the third is negotiations. These three you can use. These three points we can use to negotiate, or maybe like to make decisions to the labors and environmental problems. Okay, we move on to the next point, which is international opportunities. So when we're talking about international opportunities, we have to talk about the absolute versus comparative advantage. This one. So absolute advantage is when our country uses fewer resources to produce an output than the other country. When we're talking about comparative advantage, we're talking if our country can produce an output with lower marginal cost than the other country. So when we're talking about marginal cost is the change of total cost that comes from producing one additional unit. So the difference of absolute and comparative advantage, the difference is absolute advantage, just talking about the output, just talking about the quantity. Meanwhile, the comparative advantage is talking about the marginal cost of producing a product. And the second, from international opportunities, is investment opportunities. We often heard when in Indonesia, we receive investment from China, we receive investment from Arab country, or maybe we receive investment from the UK, Japan. Those are international opportunities that we get from other countries. And the last is the financing opportunities. Financing is more like lending money, and when the other country is lending money, they expect us or Indonesia to give interest, different from investment. When investment, they expect us to be profitable. In financing, they expect us to give interest for the amount they lend to us. Okay, and the next we're talking about foreign exchange exposure. So foreign exchange exposure we're talking about anticipatory transaction and translation. So anticipatory is when operating risk against forecasted transactions that are denominated in currencies other than the unit's functional currency. The second is transaction. Transaction is profit and loss risk due to changes in exchange rates between the recording of a transaction in balance sheet versus the settlement. And the translation is the when we translate investment in subsidiaries at current and we compare them to the historical rate. The next one is international taxation. So we have direct tax, indirect tax, sales tax, and tax haven. What I want to put emphasis is on the tax haven or the countries that have low income tax rate. So people often make often like build their company or like make their company have domiciles in that country. So tax haven is used to reduce your income tax, and it is often used by big companies. And the next is the four risk of international business over here. So we have cross-cultural, we have country, and we have commercial. Cross-cultural is like even in Indonesia, we have cross-cultural differences when we're talking like from the different culture in Padang or in Bali or in Java or in the Dayak tribe or maybe in tribes in Papua. There are lots of differences between the cultural. We're not talking about between two countries. We're talking about in the country. We have so many cultural differences. The second one is the country. So we can compare like the different culture between Indonesia and Singapore, Indonesia and Australia, or Indonesia and Brunei. Just from the neighboring countries, we can also see the differences between our culture and their culture. The third of the risk of international business is the commercial. And the fourth is the currency. So the currency, we have to understand the factors that affect the risk of the currency. The first is economic growth. The second is market psychology. The third is inflation. The fourth is government action. And the fifth is balance of payments. And also we have to make sure the value of the currency. Is it a trade surplus or trade deficit? Because when the trade surplus, we're talking about the country have more exports than the imports. And when we're talking about the trade deficit, the imports overweights the exports. And the last is the Bretton Woods Agreement. So in this agreement, dated back in the 1971, the governments could no longer maintain fixed exchange rates on gold standard. So what do? They make the IMF, International Monetary Fund, and also they make the World Bank. Okay, now we're moving on to the elements of international business over here. So the elements, we have international trade, international investment, international business risk, the participants in the international business, foreign market entry strategies, and the globalization of the markets. And next, we're moving on to the subprime mortgage crisis. It's an ongoing economic problem with liquidity issues in the global banking system, and it started in 2007 when 1.3 million home loans nationwide went into default because of this subprime mortgage, which is like the mortgage for the tarnished credit records, low credit scoring. So the lender, the people will have to pay higher rates. So when they cannot pay, the credits went default, and also it affected like millions of jobs, people losing jobs, and also the world got into global recession. Okay, we move on to the next, which is essentials of successful global firms. So the first is the successful global firms uh, have the visionary leadership. Second is the strategy. The third is the good organizational structure. The fourth is the good organizational process. And the last is the good organizational culture. So the next, when we're talking about responsiveness, we can also look at the integration responsiveness framework, which is the home replication strategy, multi-domestic strategy, global strategy, and transnational strategy. And next, we come to the last part of the material of the class is the marketing international firm. So in marketing in international firm, we have to make sure the global branding. So when you're a global firm, you have to have the global branding. So the branding becomes a unity with your own company's alignment. And the second is the rational pricing. So when you're going to another country, you have to make sure also that the price that you set is fit for the country. So maybe in different countries you have different pricing, and it's fine because we have to make sure to look at the market. If the market is ready and the market wants to enter that price, then we provide. We we cannot force our own pricing from other country to the other country. And the third one is grey marketing. So grey marketing is when you import legally of genuine or original products into a country performed by other than authorized sellers. And then when you buy the product at low price, you import it to another country and sell them right there. And the fourth is international advertising. And the last is international distribution. So you have to make sure that these 5 points is also there are those 5 points are covered in the marketing of international firm. Okay, and we're going to move on to the next point, which is the standardization versus adaptation. So when you're talking about standardization, you're talking about global integration, the global industries with the similar market segments and the product with universal specification. So you make it the same with the same market condition, with the same target market. But when you're talking about adaptation, you're talking about the local responsiveness of the market. So you're talking about how you adapt your product to the area or to the country. So maybe you can join, or maybe you can ask for help from the multi-domestic industries. You also need to take into account of the national preference, unless you have to make unique appeal. Since in adaptation, you have to have a strong image on the in the local perception of your product. So you cannot force your own global branding into the market. You have to adapt. You have to respond to the market condition. Okay, guys. So we come to the last part of the course mind map. I really thank you guys for watching the video. Please make sure to like and subscribe, and also please leave a comment if you have any comments about my presentation. I wish you all a good day, and also I wish you all successful and also a happy life. Thank you.